is I name them. If it's a female, for example, for my Prowley series, my character's name is Mary Archer. But then you need more than just a name, you need more than just a gender. So what I do is I create a bio for each and every character in the book. For example, Mary Archer, hair brown, height 5'6", light complexion, fair hair, pouty lips. You're putting all these details of the face structure, body type, height, okay? There's a bio. And then, once you're done with her bio, of her looks, you're gonna basically write, where was she born? What city? What time period? And if it's a historical, in what city, well, what street? You get to those types of details. And then once you're done with her bio, well, how did this character appear in this world? Well, they're created somehow. And so what you do is you create a bio for her mother and her father, and if there's any brothers and sisters, and you do the same thing. The age, height, what color hair, skin color, all the details. Even if her parents are not even really in the book, maybe if they're just even mentioned, you want to keep all these details, okay, for every single character. And the reason for that is specifically when you're writing a novel, you're going to come across to a point in your story where you're going to need some details, maybe of the parents. Because as you're writing, for example, Mary Archer, she wasn't the hero of my story in book 1. What happened was she was just kind of like a sidekick. But as you know, when you're writing, the story starts to get a life of its own. So what happened was she was almost like a sidekick in the beginning. By the 3rd book, she was the hero. She was the main character by book 3. And believe me, it really wasn't intended. But actually when book 1 came out and book 2 came out, the fans actually liked her better than the one who was supposed to be the hero anyways. So it just wasn't me guiding her, but it was the people reading the story. And it was also the situations in the story, the situations they ended up getting, and she just ended up taking over. And sometimes characters will do that. They'll even take over your writing for you. It's almost like they are alive, right? So, you want to create bios for like her parents, but you also want to go deeper, like where were the parents born? It's almost as if you're creating a genealogy line for your character. If anyone has ever studied genealogy, okay, you got yourself, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, and you follow them all the way down the line, who knows, 1841 or whatever, and you have all these details about your ancestry. I'm not saying go that far about one character, but, just because you're going to want to know the parents, because that character, somewhere in the story, you're going to need that information. And there are so many instances, like in a bio, you're going to even describe what she's wearing. Like say she's wearing a green belt. Well, by page 300, you'll be writing and you'll write red belt. And you'll be like, wait a minute, what color was that belt again? Was it red? Because last time you explained her belt was maybe chapter 1, and now you're writing chapter 12. So you're like, where was that in the book? Well, instead of going through everything that you've written just to find out what color her belt was when you were first creating the bio, you just pull out the bio. Oh yeah, green belt. Let's change that. My bad. And it happens in a lot of books, even a student of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. And that's something that they explain, especially Tolkien. His stories are so epic, but there's so much in his head, and there's so much that he wants to project out before he's even written it, and there's stuff he's already done. So something as simple as a belt, or a lock of hair, can be easily forgotten. So when you have the bios, you just have to pull it out, and you don't have to worry about sifting. Because what happens is when you're writing, and say you don't have a bio, and you have to go back and you're looking, just for something as simple as a bell. By the time you find it, you may have forgotten what you were going to be writing about, and it happens. That's why people get writer's block. So you have these bios, and you do it for all your characters, and you do it for maybe the parents, but it can get real detailed as well. One of the characters in my book is a monk, so he's in a monastery. Well, write bios for the head priest. Where did he come from? He lives in Rome now, but where was he originally from? And you just create all these bios. And even if the characters are only mentioned in the chapter, okay, it's still great to have this bio and the history for each character, because what if you're writing a second book and you bring up this character again, you still have that same bio. You're never going to lose all the details to it, and you're never going to make any mistakes. Go ahead.
I know exactly what you mean by characters and stuff, because for RPGs we mentioned either the Beholder, it's like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI. It's just in America it was Final Fantasy III. But I know what you mean by in Chrono Trigger, Lucia, her father was an inventor. Well, what was she? She was also an inventor. She took after her parent. And Chrono himself, you don't see his father, but his mother's there. So I kind of see what you're saying.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so character detail, is extremely important. And it's just not characters, but then you have to look at the antagonists. You have to look at the baddies. You have to look at the henchmen. Because say, for example, a henchman, an evil henchman. You're writing all these details. I even write bios for the parents of the henchmen, even though they're never mentioned at all in the story. But why did this person become a henchman? What was it in his life that turned him to evil? Well, as the bio may have the answer for you. If you don't have the answer for it yet, as you're writing the bio itself will give you answers. Oh, it was a bad childhood. It could be a variety of things. As you're writing, once you get all the bios done, most of your story is done, because all your answers are on the bios. And, I also do it, I do historical fantasy. So all the cities are actual cities that you can visit, which is a lot easier than creating a completely different universe like Tolkien did, or the guy who wrote Game of Thrones. I forget his name, I'm not too much into Game of Thrones. So, they created an entire universe themselves. That's extremely difficult to do in a completely different world. So it's a lot easier to do historical fantasy where you have a place in Europe, everyone's kind of familiar with it. So when you're doing the research, I just Google the research and the history. It makes it a lot easier than just all these things coming out of you. It makes it easier. So, and then when you're doing the bios of the cities and so forth, it's all right there on Google, and you just kind of map things out. And what's so great about that is, you get the names of villages or lakes, rivers, historical landmarks, things like that. And if you're writing just a pure fantasy, no history at all, you can look towards Europe, or you can look at, some of the old world cultures, and you get a lot of ideas for your book and kind of twist them around. So it's always good to have, files of things that interest you in regards to cities and locations. As you know, Tolkien took a lot of, like The Hobbit, for example. You think of the Shire. Well, that's any small town England. You know what I mean? If you've ever been to England. You go to these small villages and it feels like a Shire, yeah. It's like, it's all old village type places. So, and when you're writing, every writer, your life experiences, it's all going to pop into your writing. Even subconsciously, believe it or not, it's amazing. You'll write something, maybe you wrote it 5 years ago, and then you'll watch a movie, hey, I haven't seen this movie since I was like 7, I'm going to pop it in. Like, it sounds very familiar to what I wrote 5 years ago. that's because you didn't realize it, but when you were 7 years old, you were watching something, and when you were writing or creating your story, it triggers something within you, and then you start writing, and that happens quite a bit. So basically, you have your bios, and when you're writing, you just have to pick them up and go from there. And that's basically about it. Do you have any basic questions? Yes?
Well, how do you figure out the psychology for each character?
So that's a good question. My work for Dungeons and Dragons is lawful good, chaotic good, neutral evil, all this.
So you never took any psychology classes or anything?
Actually, I have taken psychology classes. Actually, I wanted to start my own practice, but then I decided, forget this, I'm just going to write. I'm having more fun than taking all these courses. But you want to put the psychology of a character in the bio. Usually, you don't get to that part of your character until about like the second page of a bio.
How do you figure out which character is suited for each personality type?
Right. Well, how I look at it is I visualize my character after I have the bio down. I look at that character. For example, Mary Archer, she's a typical English girl, very light complected, very porcelain type skin, very attractive young lady. And just thinking of that image, just image alone, her personality starts to come from that image of what she looks like. And I see her as a very innocent girl, doesn't know much about the world, and through the adventures in the book, she begins to learn more of the world. You see, so for me, just the visual of the character almost throws their personality at me. Like the monk, he's hapless. The other monks won't let him do anything. He's like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer of monks. You know what I mean? Wash the floors, polish the brass. You're worthless. Just do what the work we don't want to do. So you have that character there, and he doesn't look all that bright. So just because his looks, he's not all that bright. You make him kind of clumsy and. Right. But through my book, like Mary, he learns to become a fighter, to understand. And they are traveling together, this quest, this adventure, and through both of their personalities, they are learning as the story goes along. And if you have characters where you have characters like that, where they're kind of hapless in the beginning, it just sort of happens through the story. They become heroes, right? For evil creatures and adversaries, one of my characters, Skulk. I basically, when I thought of him, I thought of like, Lord of the Rings, Smeagol, and like Tolkien, when he wrote that character, he just actually wrote down basics about Smeagol, and when you're writing the character, you can almost sense the character within you. You ever write something and you can just feel that character, and you feel the evil pouring out of this character, and you feel there's so much more evil this guy can do. So you create situations where he wreaks more and more havoc until he becomes this badass, right? Yeah. Right. But one of my characters in the second book, The Wizard of Prowley, I went straight with a historical figure for that, because he's a wizard. But I didn't want Harry Potter. I didn't want, Mickey Mouse and the broomsticks and the waters. I wanted an evil wizard. And I started studying the history of wizards. And it brought me down to the New Testament. There was this guy named Simon Magus, and he was looking at the apostles and seeing them like put hands on people and do these miracles. He was like, wow, that's really cool. So he started, and this is actually in the Bible, he followed, the apostles, and he wanted to harness that power. Well, the apostles let him into the group, but then later they kicked him out because he wasn't they felt he wasn't using these powers, these miracles for the people, but he was wanting the power for himself. So Simon Magus, becomes, evil because he just wants the pure power. He doesn't want the power to help other people. And that's actually, in the good book. So what I did is I took that character, and in the Bible, they basically, I think they put his soul in a pig or something. The pig went off a cliff and he died. But what I put is he made a deal with the devil, so he can live eternal. So in the second book, he was encased in ice, and it melted. And so to use that as a background is amazing. I had people come up to me and say, we picked up The Wizard of Prowley. We started reading it. Oh, Simon Magus, that sounds familiar. And then, wow, we can't believe what you did with him. So you can take just a basic historical figure and, alter him a little bit. There was this warrior that in the Prowley region where I was, where my books take place, and there was a warrior. I don't want to say he was like Dracula, like Vlad, the story. And there's a Dracula movie, the Dracula Untold coming out. That movie coming out. I wouldn't say he was to that point, but he was very similar to that, where he was a really good guy and he kind of turned a little evil. So I took that character and I just put it in my book. What's so great about using historical figures is their bio is pretty much already made. You just need to make sure you have it all written down. And if it's a historical fantasy, a lot of readers like that, because they're like, wow, I can't believe what you did with that historical figure, and then how he turned out. So, and that makes it a little bit easier. But, in regards to their personalities, just when you're doing the bio and the imagery of them, almost brings out their personality. Like, for example, do you ever, meet someone for the first time, where your friend introduces you to someone else, and they always say, don't judge a person by their first appearances. But when you meet them, don't you kind of see them, and you kind of can see almost by how they dress, how their facial expressions, how they talk. You can almost see their personality before you even know them. I mean, I wouldn't base anybody on first impressions, but once you start talking to them, you get to know them more. That's almost like what you're doing with your characters. As you're writing your bio, it's almost like you're having an internal conversation with them as well, and the personality comes out. So yeah. Is there any other questions or anything, any points I should get to?
Do you ever have a hard time getting your audience to get emotionally attached to characters?
Sometimes it could be a problem. I haven't had someone come to me and say negatives about my characters. I know that I do become attached to my characters. In one of my books, almost everybody dies. But there's this character I really liked, all these characters, they're all pieces of you. They're all pieces of your personality. And when I write, I have the earphones on, and what I do is when I'm writing, I have music for the situation. For if it's a battle scene or something that I'm writing, I'll play the soundtrack of Lord of the Rings or the soundtrack of Braveheart or something that gets you into the mood, gets you into the presence of the situation. And there are times I'm writing about a character and I'm slowly killing them off. And I don't want to get too personal, but I'm sitting there writing and tears start coming down my eyes. I feel like I'm literally murdering something that I created, and the music doesn't help either, because the music's always very emotional, right? That's why they have soundtracks. So yeah, it's always important, I think, to put music when you're writing. And a lot of times, if you're writing, for me, when I write, is to get away from the real world, okay? There's so many problems out in the world. I want to escape it. Well, what's a good way to escape it? Putting on the earphones, putting on the Microsoft Word, and going to town on a story that you want to write. And there have been times I've been so engulfed in a story, I have my earphones on, I'm plugging away, and someone will tap me on the shoulder and I'll jump back 10 feet, you just completely took me out of my inner body experience. You know what I mean? It's like, because you're so involved, you know? And then, so yeah. Anything to you, sir?
How much of your scene is pre-written in your mind, and how much of it is sort of a free flow, conscious,
Right.
it's happening now and it's
Right.
already being written now?
Well, as mentioned previously, that I write bios for all the characters, every detail, even the parents of the characters. And all that is set in stone, you know. But as I'm writing the story, like I mentioned with this Mary character, she wasn't supposed to be the hero in the beginning, but by book 3, she was the main hero. So basically, as I'm writing, I just let it go. You know, it takes a life of its own. And then, you know, once it's over, it's like you created this living, breathing, you know, this story. They say the Constitution's a living document. I think everything that you write is a living document. You know what I mean? So, and to me, the characters that I've made and the characters that you make in your mind are real. You know, I know that sounds crazy, you know, but to me, they're real individuals. And I remember out of college, I had so many stories, so many ideas, and then I came to the realization, I have so much stuff in my head, all of it will never, ever be out. I mean, there's just so much to write about. And then I came to the conclusion that the most important thing for me is get these characters published, right? Because once they're published, then they're truly real, right? Bilbo Baggins, if he was never published, if The Hobbit was just a story that ended up on the floor of Tolkien's house and was never released, who would ever know about it but him? You know, so once something is published, it's not only alive for yourself, but it's alive for the world, you know. I know it sounds a little dramatic. Yeah. Any other questions at all? No? Okay. How many people writing books, comic books? Yeah. Oh wow, quite a bit. What do you find difficult when you're writing? You're about to say it right there. It's a good question, huh?
Sticking with it, I guess.
Sticking with it.
Finishing, following through there, finish.
Following through.
Finish your job.
You know, it's difficult. It really is, because when I was writing my trilogy, I was stuck in that world for 4 years. And by the end of the 3rd book, I wanted to rip out my hair. It's like, you know, I want to write something completely different. I've been living with these characters for 4 years. It's almost like a love-hate relationship you have with them. It's like, okay, enough. I want to write some sci-fi stuff. I want to do something completely different. But then I have to finish you guys, too. You know, so it becomes sometimes irritable. And there are times you wake up in the morning and you get on the computer. Oh, let me check my emails. I got to write, but I'll check my emails first. Oh, let's see what's happening on Facebook. 4 hours go by. Man, I was supposed to write something. You know what I mean? When you get on a computer, it's probably okay to check your emails, but try to stay off the social media stuff. I mean, it's difficult for the most seasoned. Stephen King, I mean, he'd probably say the same thing. I don't check my social media until after I'm writing, like a treat for myself. You know what I mean? Because you really have to write something every single day. I usually bring a journal. That's the hip way of calling, they used to call diaries, right, when I was a kid. But a journal. And I carry a journal wherever I go. Because if I'm driving in a car or I'm out, you know, at the convention, and something enters